Welcome to another episode of the Strange Motion Way podcast. I'm your host, Tim Strange, along with my hostess with the mostest still,
Carrie Strange.
Today's a very special one. This was either the first or second one that we recorded. I know it was our first Zoom.
It was the first recording that we ever did. We were going to try it by using your dad as our guinea pig.
And if you know where my dad lives, in the middle of Farmerland, USA, the internet runs off of a wheel with some squirrels running in it. So the video is probably a little fuzzy.
Sound is a little choppy.
But it's pretty good. The story is pretty amazing when you listen to the story about my dad. He comes from really bad childhood, some juvenile home, foster care, and but did raised at least one awesome kid. My sister's pretty cool, right?
True. That's true.
And me.
Okay.
And he's did Harleys, Tri-5s, farms. He's got 2 farms now. So it's my inspiration for hot rods, obviously, and my work ethic. But it's a pretty interesting story to listen to about not giving up, doing basically what you want with your life, even though people says you can't.
All right. First, we're going to have a word from our sponsor. The Strange Motion Way podcast, brought to you by Royal Purple Synthetic Oils.
Royal Purple premium synthetic motor oils and high-performance chemicals have been designed to improve performance in all conditions and provide cleaner operation, better mileage, and decreased oil change frequency. That means less oil changes. With products available for your gasoline and diesel engines, Royal Purple is the obvious choice for your performance needs. Drive with Royal Purple, the synthetic expert.
Good to go.
So ready to start?
We are ready to start.
Okay.
Take one. That was my mother-in-law.
Tell her that's very loud when she screams. The microphone is very sensitive.
It is.
If she farts, we'll be able to hear it.
We will, so don't fart, Mom.
So, yeah, keep it down to a low key. Squeeze them cheeks
All right.
together.
We're going to start out with a disclaimer and a warning. The things that you hear on this podcast are not the responsibility of myself, and I am not.
I haven't done my intro yet.
Oh, I know, but I think we need to do a warning before you even do an intro. All right. Go ahead, Tim.
So this guy is an old school Harley chopper builder before getting into hot rods, mostly Tri-5 Chevys. He's a farmer, and last year he got a huge honor in the Illinois Beef Association. And he raised one awesome daughter that has been a teacher and now a counselor, and a pretty rad niece. Oh, and he's got a pretty decent son, too. The best guy on the planet here tonight with us is my dad, Dan Strange. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
Good.
Good. What's new?
So now Carrie wants to give her disclaimer that some of this... We're going to try to stay on the right track, but since it's my dad, if anybody of you have met my father, you realize where I get my warped sense of humor from. But we'll try to stay clean.
The views and opinions that you hear here tonight are not the responsibility of Carrie Strange or Strange Emotion. We're not responsible for any education that you may or may not receive tonight.
Okay, so this is mostly a hot rod podcast. We've been doing a lot of custom guys that we've been recording. Carrie wants this one to be the first podcast that goes out when we do launch this in a few months. So that it is mostly a hot rod thing. But I would like to touch just a little bit on a quick brief on your childhood and how you were raised and how you were brought up.
Well, I always tell people a crow shut me on the stump, the sun hatched me out, and I was raised by the animals. But that's pretty damn close. So I was abandoned when I was 3. I was in like 6 different foster homes, a detention center. Not a very good growing up.
So, yeah, like I said, this briefly, I just want to show this as a positive of what you have done and not given up on your life and worked very hard and have an unbelievable life and great family. So we don't need to touch on all that, but I want people to know that you didn't come from a silver spoon family, obviously, and you had nothing to give to you growing up.
No.
But thankfully, you got into a great foster home, the Kinnears, when you were older. Those were the people that I called Grandpa and Grandma on your side. They taught you to work very hard. One story, maybe touch on, you wanted to play basketball, and I remember Grandpa Kinnear would come and get you from practice because it was time to milk the cows, so you didn't get to go to all the practices, did you?
Right. And if I missed the school bus, I had to run across the pasture and jump the creek and pick it up over at my uncle's, which was about 3/4 of a mile away. And by the time the bus came back around, I could be over at the highway. Wasn't always clean, though. It smelled like cows, but I went to school.
So having that type of upbringing and a hardworking farm life, how did you get into Harleys and then the hot rods? How did that even go? I mean, I'm into hot rods because you got me into hot rods and my uncle. You didn't have, Grandpa Kinnear was not into cars, hot rods, anything. I mean, he's basic transportation, farm trucks, and I remember for the longest time he drove his grain truck, was his driver to go to town to get stuff before he finally bought a pickup truck.
Yeah, it was really funny. They bought the newest car they had was an old T-Bird, and it had like power windows and locks and stuff like that. And he never could figure out. And it was an automatic, and he had a heck of a time because everything he drove before, even Mom's old Fairlane, was a 4-speed on the floor. And he had trouble figuring out the automatic.
Was that? I remembered it was a Fairlane. It wasn't. I always remembered it was like a tannish yellow Granada, but it was a Fairlane, wasn't it?
It was a Fairlane, yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, I don't know. I had some friends I run around with that run. I bought a dirt bike because I thought, well, I could ride that back and forth, and I could ride it in the pasture to check cows. So I had an old dirt bike, and I rode that thing. It was a little Honda 80. We rode that thing all over the place. And then I thought, man, I need a bigger one. Well, then I went to like a Sportster. I bought a basket case. That's what I do. I'd buy a basket case in the wintertime, build it during the winter, get it painted, haul it out in the spring, go to bike shows, and that's how I kind of got into it. So,
well, how old were you when you bought your first Harley to build? Were you married yet then?
Yeah, I was married. Yeah. She's the one that told me I needed a hobby. Mom always said, you need a hobby. I think she got tired of me trying to make kids all the time. But I enjoyed the Harleys. But then I got sick and started having back trouble with kidneys because I'd always build the hardtails. I'd throw the shocks away and weld the hardtail frame on it, cut the neck in two, and weld a rake on it and build choppers. So,
yeah, of course. When I was little, I remember the choppers and going to chopper shows, and I remember Uncle Joe painted one of the long stretched out ones. It was a little more stretched before you did the. In my shop, I have a framed picture of the High Plains Drifter Harley that you did. That wasn't that the one that the guys from Galva painted the murals and everything on that one?
Yes, the Murray boys.
And was that your last bike that you built? Was that one, or did you have another one after that?
That was the last one I built.
Okay, you've had them off and on, more stock ones.
I think I built a Sportster after that. I had a 57 Sportster, and I wanted it because it was the first year they made the Sportster, the 900 Sportster.
And I remember
that's the one Joe painted.
When I was about 3 years old, we moved up to the Woodhall area, and I remember one time that we took the Harley. I don't remember which one it was, but all four of us. I was in front of you holding on to the gas cap, and then you were driving, and then my sister was wedged in between you, and my mom was on the back. I remember doing that once, and then I kind of remember shortly after that, you got an old 57 Chevy. So what bike would that have been? Was that the High Plains Drifter, or was that the Sportster?
That was a Sportster. We really shouldn't talk about that because the PETA people might not approve of that.
We can say allegedly.
Let's
Allegedly.
say allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
No, PETA is the welfare of animals. I think it's like DCFS is the welfare of children, but that's like, what do they call that when it's been over 7 years? You can't get in trouble for that for something that you did back then.
Oh, good. I'm clean then. I've been pretty good the last 5 years, so that should be pretty good. But anyway, then the doctor said I had kidney problems and I needed to quit riding the hardtails. Well, I liked the hardtails because it made me look cool then, see. You didn't care much about your health back then. It was like, you got to look cool.
Which,
So anyway,
to tell some of the people listening to this, but I've got pictures of my dad that I share sometimes on my social media, that he was a long-haired biker guy, always had his sleeves off or a tank top on, and I got a picture of him kickstarting one of his choppers. It's a really fuzzy picture, but it's really cool, yes. So he was a long-haired biker guy.
I was ready for action all the time.
He always had his sleeves cut off. Are you sure you're not related to Randy Stewart?
Randy might be my real brother. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's see. I've met his mother. No, you're not. It's fine. No, I didn't. No. Now, if it had 4 legs, it could be, but no.
So my grandpa, my mom's dad, was a construction guy and a preacher. So what did Grandpa Benny think when my mom brought you home being a long-haired biker guy?
Well, that's kind of a long story, but my mother-in-law told my wife that it would never work. And somehow or other, my daughter showed up 7 months. She was premature. She was premature. You was well thought of. We went to great lengths to make you, but Lisa was early. You were 9 months like you're supposed to be, but she was early. So anyway, we got married. My mother-in-law said, this is never going to work. He's a wild man. He's crazy. He's foul-mouthed. And he'll do anything. And
I can hear Grandma's voice saying that out loud right now in my head.
we had just, when I lost my love of my life, we had been married 52 years. So I guess 52 years, not very long, but we made it.
So how long did she think you were going to make it? Did she put a amount of time on it?
You know, no, she didn't, but I will tell you one funny thing about this, and then we'll get back on how I got into cars. But I remember when she was in the nursing home, I went to see her, and because I was in Galesburg, and I was going to be nice. You know, I always tried to be nice to her. And I went in, and everybody said, she won't know you. She don't know anybody. And I'm like, well, I'm going to, you know, I'd feel good about being there. And anyway, I went to church with Betty that Sunday, and I told them, I said, she recognized me. I don't know why you guys had a problem. They go, really? What did she say? I said, she didn't say nothing. She just frowned like she always did when she seen me.
So, Tim, do you remember when we got married?
Yeah, I know Carrie was getting at a point that in the background of this is Carrie's mom sitting in the background. I believe your mom gave us 6 months. I know it was less than a year, didn't she?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a bet between my mom and Donna that we would not make it six months. Actually, I think Donna said 2 months.
And that's the only reason we're still married, just to prove those bitches wrong.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm glad you married her, because my Nomad that I'm so proud of, you took to prom twice with this woman, and there was so many footprints on the headliner of that car.
Well, those weren't ours, because we never went parking in the Nomad. I respected that car too much. We got a hotel room instead.
So let's get back on subject.
But anyway, back to me getting into cars. One day I was with HK, who was a guy I used to work for, and we went clear on the other side of by Aledo and bought a 2-ton truck load of baby pigs to put in the hog house, and I spotted this old 57 Chevy sitting out in the pasture. Had weeds growing up around it. I took a mental picture, and I told your mom about it, and I said, let's go for a ride. And you were in the back. And I remember I bought that car for $175.
Do you remember what year that was? 70. I know it was done in 78. Was it done before 78?
I think we bought it in 77, I think.
Okay.
But, and
So I was 6 years old then.
And then I didn't like the front end was all messed up, so I laid it on the, remember I took it in there and I put it in the garage, made a bunch of X's on the floor and bought a straight axle and put underneath of it and made one of them high rollers out of it, and I loved that car. It was amazing. Rusty, and I took it down to the neighbors and he helped me figure out bodywork. I didn't know what I was doing. And it had big holes in the back of the trunk where them always rust out, like on the lower part of the quarters.
Which is crazy because you think about it, that was a 57 Chevy and it was just 20 years old at that time.
Yeah.
And it was already rusted out and sitting in a field and it was only 20 years old.
Yeah.
That's like us buying a 2003 car out of a yard, a cattle pasture right now and fixing it up.
Yeah. And the darn thing, the holes were so big back there, and I said, well, we got to weld some steel back there. And he goes, oh, no. He crawled up in the top of his barn and pulled down 2 great big sparrow's nests and shoved them down from the inside by the trunk and then body-puttied on the outside. And, you know, when I got rid of that car, you still couldn't tell that was there.
Yeah.
He opened the trunk.
So this car, for some people, I share this on my social media too. It was a red 57 Bel Air 2-door hardtop. It had chrome Krager 5 spokes on it. Basically a gasser. The tires were so wide they stuck out of the wheel wells in the back, but it was raised up that high. So you must have put shackles on the back to get it up. And then a straight axle on the front, tilt front end. Had a 327. It was a small block.
Yeah.
Tunnel ram, dual hollies, velocity stacks, and it had red shag carpet on the dash, or was it black?
That was sexy.
And then it had 4 bucket seats that were black vinyl diamond tuck. And then his thing that he was famous for on a few cars that he had, he always kept it, was a chrome chain steering wheel.
Yep. And always had a 4-speed in them.
And I remember a few things. I remember the year we were driving through Bishop Hill. And that was the last year Bishop Hill did the 4th of July celebrations because there was like biker gang fights. I remember seeing a dude allegedly hit another dude with a chain as we were leaving town. I remember one time we were up in town in Galva for the 4th of July parade, and peer pressure is a bitch. Your buddy said to do a burnout, and you did a burnout and tore the rear end out. Didn't get to do the parade. I remember Mom was mad as hell at that.
I remember that his son doing the same thing in Cambridge when his girlfriend told him not to do that.
That was my brother-in-law Rudy's fault. It was his peer pressure on him.
Peer pressure.
That's just a bad habit you picked up from your father. You have a deaf ear sometimes.
Yeah. So I remember, I don't know, maybe 78, you brought it to grade school. You brought it to show and tell. You took part of the afternoon off, drove it over to Alpha. And I remember you started it for all the kids. We're standing out there, and everybody thought I was the coolest guy ever because you let me get in and shut it off. I remember that.
I think my funniest car story about you, though, is when we was on vacation up the house. He's like a brother to me. And I spotted this 55, yellow and white, 55 no, it was red and white, 55 2-door hardtop sitting out beside a building. Well, it was there to get upholstery in it. So it had no seats in it. And I said, well, I really want to test drive it. So we pop those square milk, what do you call them?
Milk crates.
Milk crates in there. And I remember I got on it when I slammed second gear, you almost lit in the trunk because there wasn't any seats.
Yeah. I remember that thing had one of them inline Hurst shifters that you just bang, bang, bang back and forth.
Don't tell DCSF or whatever that is that one
Yeah.
either.
But to jump back to the Red 57, the Tri-5s always come and went through the garage. You're always working on them and selling them and flipping them and buying them, I remember. And then you got the 55 hardtop. You still had – did you start the hardtop 55 when you still had the Red 57, or did that come – I know I was trying to get to the point that you traded that Red 57 even up for a Corvette.
69 Corvette. And you guys were in 4-H, and we always had to take our pigs and the calves in a 2-ton truck, and you had to wait 2 or 3 hours to use the chute to unload the livestock. And I got mad, and I told Mom, I says, I'm gonna sell that car and buy a stock trailer. So I traded that car for a stock trailer, so we didn't have to wait in line to unload our livestock at the fairs.
What car was that? The Vet?
That was a 69 Corvette T Roadster. It had a lift-off hardtop convertible.
And that's the car I learned to drive a 4-speed in.
Yes, sir. You were 8 years old.
Yeah, and I think that was right probably the week we were getting rid of that Corvette, because then you thought, well, I only got to drive it a little bit and do the little hops with the clutch and kill it a little bit, because you're like, oh, you can't tail the clutch out because we got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
You guys froze up a little bit there. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
just keep going. It'll be fine.
So then the next car you built was a 55 hardtop Bel Air that was yellow and white.
Yes.
And I still have pictures of that. We worked on it in the garage, and I remember sanding on it, and I remember getting in trouble because I was block sanding too much, and you didn't want to reprime it a second or third time. We'd already done it twice. And I got some cool pictures of you and Mom sitting in there putting the carpet in, and Gene Nally did the interior, but you and Mom put the carpet in the car. I got a really cool picture of that.
Yep. We built that in a 2-stall garage. Me and her, we'd work on it. You kind of got in the way. You always had to be right there seeing what was going on. And I remember once when I was wet sanding, I grabbed you and throwed you up on top of the car and gave you a sandpaper and a jug and let you water play up there on top. So, and then that's where you learned how to paint. Remember that?
Yeah, you gave me the spray gun. This was another tilt front end car, and you gave me the spray gun to paint the firewall, to spray the yellow. And I got all excited, and I just squeezed the trigger and didn't move and ran the hell down the firewall. And you left that run there, and you would show people at the shows, that's where my son learned how to paint. And they just look at that run and says, well, he didn't look like he learned too well. But
had a nice pile on the floor, though.
yeah. But yeah, that car was a you put Nomad rear wheel wells on it, and it had the modular Kragers, the steel with all the little round holes, and they were gold anodized centers, tilt front end, another 327 tunnel ram. This one had a blower scoop on it.
Yeah.
I remember we went up to, at that time, Mr. Roadster was in Rock Island along the river, and I think we got the blower scoop up there. On a podcast that I was on, I always thought that we went up to Chicago, and I seen a snake. There was a story when I did the Roadster Shop podcast up into some guy's rafters. I always remembered it was a car place, and then since I've asked you about that, you said that was a guy that we went and got a Springer front end when you were still doing Harleys. So I was real little and I remember that snake, and I still don't like snakes.
Yeah, you were pretty small then, so. But no, I've had I'll bet I've had close to 45, 50, 55, 6, and 7s over the years.
Yeah. So on that yellow, the 55, this is a trip that kind of, I say, it was the bigger spark that lit me for what I do for a living now. Is we went to the Classic Chevy convention in Dearborn, Michigan. Up until this time, I'd never stayed in a hotel. We'd stayed at a friend's house when we went on vacation. Never stayed, that I remember, stayed in a hotel, and it was at the Hyatt. So we didn't have money. We had stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, we're going to vacation here and we're going to Disney World or something. So how did you convince my mom to load up the family, in the 78 Dodge Magnum as a tow vehicle and haul that 55 Chevy clear to Michigan for vacation?
Well, I can't say this either, but it was sexual favors was part of it.
Oh, I married a woman with low standards also.
Then it turned out I couldn't get you kids out of the damn motel room long enough, so it didn't do me any good, but she was still happy she had a good time. So
Was it a Hampton Inn?
It was a Hyatt.
was a Hyatt Regency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't take Carrie to the Hyatts.
See, I forgot when they were young. When you guys were young, you guys don't remember this, but when we wanted to have a little quality, time, I would buy a great big bag of M&Ms. When Mom come home with a big bag of M&Ms, I knew it was time to party because I'd open that, throw it out in the yard, and have you guys go pick them up. And that gave me just enough time. And if I thought you was going to get done too quick, I put Vaseline on the doorknobs. So, but anyway.
Oh my. But anyway, back on track here. Going to that show I realized that, I at this time, and we went to all these local car shows and never really traveled to big events. I wasn't going with my Uncle Jim to big, custom shows and NSRA shows yet. Mm-hmm. And that was just a trigger that realized that there was but there was only like 700 cars at that show. There was less than 1,000 cars.
And it was a record that year for that.
Yeah, but it was, we met guys from magazines, the Super Chevy and all that, and guys at the Classic Chevy that I still know some of these people now. Chris, his parents were in the Tri-5s, Chris Sondels that runs the Tri-5 Association. I met him then. I was 11, he was 12. It's just crazy, this world of hot rods, when you meet people and they end up staying in your life from somebody that I met when I was 11 years old.
You don't really want to tell them that you and Chris were in the bathtub. In the swimming pool together.
We were in the swimming pool. Yeah, we played in the swimming pool. But it really was my eye-opener of that people could do this hot rod thing for a living. And pretty much ever since then, I just wanted to build hot rods for a living because I seen that other people were doing it, whether they had a parts company or a restoration shop. There was a time there, a couple summers, that I thought I wanted to be like Grandpa Kinnear and be a dairy farmer. And I think I was 13 when I went up and stayed at Neuheisel's. Is that right? Neuheisel?
Yeah, Neuheisel's, yeah.
And realized that I didn't want to do that because you had to be at the farm every day, morning and night. You couldn't go and do anything because you had to milk the cows. So
I think what bothered you more than anything, you went out and milked the cows and done the chores, then come back in and ate breakfast. And you was always used to jumping out of bed and hitting the cereal.
Yeah, I'm still like that. Carrie don't even talk to me till I eat my oatmeal in the morning.
Yeah. So, but yeah, but I remember the Dearborn trip was really cool because remember the guy named Bob Dahl? You were just infatuated with him.
Yeah.
And he had a race car and he talked to you and guys like that, and that's what they need to think about today. A lot of these young builders like you guys, you're young. I'm 74, but you're still young to me. But you need to take time for these little whippersnappers. They're kind of a pain.
Yeah.
They ask all those questions and they get under your feet. But you got to take the time for this younger generation because we need to get them involved.
Yeah, when I met Bob Dahl, because he was in all the Classic Chevy magazines and some of the Super Chevys, he had kind of a high-sitting 56 Bel Air tilt front end car with the motor set back and brushed center lines on it. And I still have pictures of that car in the room in there. That and Roger Gustin was there doing jet exhibitions that year, and he was really cool to me also, I remember as a kid. And then there's still a car that I seen that was drag racing that it's got crazy paint on it from like the 70s style paint, and it still shows up with all that paint on it at Tri-5s now, all those years later with the same.
Is that the 55?
Yeah, the black and silver one with the never-ending lines on it.
Yeah. That car's never changed. I've seen it race at Cordova, and it's been everywhere.
So then that car, again, you sold the Corvette so you could get a stock trailer so we could haul our animals to the fair and everything, which being in 4-H is how I bought a lot of a lot of parts for BMX bikes and hot rods because I'd sell my show pigs, I'd sell my heifer and my steer, and then buy stuff. And then you sold the yellow.
Not to change the subject, but I think you still owe for feed bills. I don't remember you guys ever paying any feed bills.
You can just keep the person that's sitting beside you for the feed bill.
Okay. I'll try.
So you buy a farm. I'm still a little hurt in the heart that I never got to drive that yellow 55. I learned to drive my 4-speed in the vet, and by this time I had a 55 with a column shift that I drive around the barnyard. But you never let me drive the yellow 55, and it was probably a very smart thing because how much horsepower that thing had. And I remember I begged and begged the day you were delivering that car to let me drive it once, and that thing was pretty much like driving on ice. So it was probably a good thing you wouldn't have got your tractor. So
I remember just before I got rid of that vet, we was going to school for something. Mom was in the Corvette, the 69, and I was in the yellow 55, and we went up here at the stop sign, turned right, and I remember she got on it, and I got on it, and I almost lit that thing on the back end of that Corvette. It caught that thing so quick, it was crazy. But
so how long did he own that car that you didn't get to drive?
Well, that's another funny story. When I bought this farm in 86, I had that 55 and I was real proud of it. And remember, I worked for a farmer, and he let me use his farm machinery. Well, he kept belly aching about I had it when I should have been over there doing his work. And a friend of mine, Dan Dexter, one of my best friends, had sold farm equipment. And I ended up, he told me, he said, you need your own farm equipment. Hi, Turbo. And he said, well, how about I take that yellow car and I'll give you a full line of farm equipment to start farming with. So I got a tractor, a disc, a planter, a tractor, and a loader, everything for that car. We figured up we got a really good bunch of money for that car. So that's where that went. So I needed farm machinery.
Did you own it for like 5 years, 10 years?
Probably. Well, we went to Dearborn in 81, and I bought this farm in 86, so about 87. So 6 years. Okay. 6, 7 years.
So you owned it less than the amount of time you've owned the new vet that I still haven't been able to sit in.
Well, you got to clean yourself first.
Well, he's got the newer vet that he's got. It's a what? 2001 or
2000.
2000. He had it. It was a running joke there for a while. I've only drove it once, and I think he owned it for at least 5-6 years before he let me drive it, if not longer. Katie got to take it to prom. Other farm kids got to take it to prom.
The whole county has taken it to prom, and I haven't even sat in it.
Well, the kids borrow it for prom and homecoming more than I drive it all year.
Yeah.
So I loan it out, so.
You see who the favorite is. Not me.
So I kind of forget the story how you finally got a Project Builder 56 Nomad and then ended up not building it, but you traded it and some money to Al to get the Nomad that was maroon and silver that you own still now that's orange and cream.
Right.
When did you get I kind of don't remember what year you got the Nomad.
I'm trying to think. It was, Al would be the one to know that because I bought the car and was going to restore it. Well, if you remember right, I had a friend named Al, still do, one of my best friends, they had bought a house from the school. Well, times were a little bit hard up in Minnesota because they sold cars and rebuilt cars and done Minnesota paint jobs and squirt jobs. And but anyway, they was having trouble and they was going to lose their house. And he called and we was talking about, and I said, I don't have the money to loan you. It was like $3,500 or something. And I said, I'd loan it to you if I had it. And I said, I've got this Nomad needs rebuilt. And next thing you know, Al, he's a worker. He says, I'll bring my Nomad down there and I'll take your Nomad back. And so that's where I ended up borrowing the money to give that to him for his house. And then that's how I got the good Nomad. And I think he ended up building that Nomad and taking it back to the 50s and then sold it.
So yeah, that Nomad, man, it was a runner. What did it have in the motor? It was an Oldsmobile motor or something, wasn't it? Just because he found a good one.
It had a 330 Olds engine in it, and it's got a Ford Granada rear end. It's got a 66 Belvedere steering column, tilt and telescopic. It's got the 605 power steering box, the old style power steering. And I've redone it once, and I've owned it since, I think, 87, 8. Maybe. I've had that car a long time. Almost as long as I've owned this farm, and I bought it in 86.
Okay.
You graduated in 89. Did he have it then, Tim?
I don't remember that he had it then. I don't know.
I was almost thinking it was after that, because I remember when they came down for the car show and it flooded in Laura.
Yeah.
And they were driving it, and he turned around in the middle of the road and he hit something.
He hit that.
Oh, yeah.
And you had only, you were furious.
I was madder than
because you had only had it not long, I was thinking.
Yeah, I was out of high school then, but you were still in high school, Carrie. So then we took it to both your junior and your senior prom.
Yep.
That's where the tracks came from the ceiling.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly, yes.
I guarantee it was not our tracks. Might have been your guys' tracks, but it was not our tracks.
But, so then I've had, I don't know, I just kept getting more of them.
And you got a 57 210 sedan right now, a black one, that it's kind of got a cool story. Back in the day, there was a 12:30 a.m. WMRZ was the oldies station. They always put on a big car show, and they gave away a car each year. And I remember they gave that car away, and it had like red, kind of like velour, not really crushed velvet, and a small block in it. And whoever won it wasn't really a car person, and somebody recommended you, and they called you, and you bought that car.
I was building helping the neighbor build a big confined hog building up by Geneseo. And we was sitting there talking one day, and I said, yeah, I love tri-5s. I'm a 5, 6, 7 guy. And the guy's wife said, the neighbor down here just won a car, and he don't want it. So I took the rest of the afternoon off, went down and bought the car. And that was on a Friday afternoon. Saturday, there was a car show in Aledo. Lisa came home with her, what was that car she had? Citation?
Yeah.
She had for a while. Came home from college. So I jerked the plates off it, put them on the black 57, and went to Aledo to a car show and come back and took plates off and put back on. Allegedly back on Lisa's car. So, but I've still got that car too.
Yeah, it went to Dan Milley, and Dan Milley put the motor out of it, and then finally we got it running. I don't know, a handful of years ago now, I guess, for you, and changing the motor in it again now. But yeah, you went to a couple buddies and bounced back to you, so it's cool to have that thing back. Then you got a red 57 Bel Air hardtop, and it's got a cool story because Carrie's dad found it at a yard sale in Phoenix, Arizona in the suburbs, and you went out and got it and brought it back.
Yep, what trailer did, that was in 97. I bought that car, and I've still got it, and the Nomad, and so just bought a 57 pickup from Texas, and I got a 57 wagon I found sitting in the boonies over by Oak Run. 4-door wagon.
I've only seen pictures. I've not been home since you got it, the 4-door wagon. So now you're kind of looking for a 56 sedan.
Yep, I got a spare motor. I need something to put a spare motor in.
I've sent you a couple. The one you missed, and the other one you just said, "Oh, that's nice." And that was all you responded to.
Well, I don't want to spend that kind of money, though. I'm on a fixed income now. I'm on Social Security. You got to remember that.
And then I always tell everybody the luck that you have buying cars. This 57 four-door wagon that you just bought had been pretty much sitting for over 10 years out in the weeds, right?
It's right next to an old garage with tree. It had leaves on it about 3-4 inches thick, and he had got it. And I'd tried to buy it. I even had a friend, Greg Schilling, was a friend of this guy's, and I kept telling him, tell him I want to buy that car. And he'd come back and said, nope, it's not for sale. Well, then about 6 months ago, I get a video from Greg Schilling, and it's a video of him and that guy driving it down the road. They got it running, and they drove it down the road. Well, then he decided to sell it. Well, then Dan Milley told me that his brother works over at Oak Run, said that yellow 57 wagon was sitting out for sale. He'd cleaned it up. So that weekend, I went over there and bought it, too. So.
And then drove it home. A car that's been pretty much sitting in the weeds for 10 years, you drove it home.
And I've been driving that thing everywhere. I got to get plates on it because the darn law was at the filling station when I went to eat breakfast. Allegedly.
So I always tell this story on how you're lucky with stuff and you can have something sitting for years and fire up and it'll still run and drive. Because when we were doing that 57 sedan, me and Scuba Steve, when we got the motor in it, tried to get the brakes going, I said, okay, it needs a master cylinder. The master cylinder's dry. And then it needed wheel cylinders. And you go, it can't. The brakes worked perfect the last time I drove it. The last time that car had a motor in it and drove on the road, I was still in high school. But you thought that the brakes should still be good, that it's been sitting in a barn all this time. So, yeah, you don't think anything goes bad when it sits. So
no, you got to give it a chance. But
so then one time we went. I don't remember what we drove, but you went with me. We went to the Street Machine Nationals in DeQuoin. The only time I used to go all the time. And 1 year, I don't even think we took a hot rod that year. We just drove down in like my truck or something, didn't we? Or Mom's car just to go and went down for 3-day weekend.
There was a bunch of us stayed in the motel room. I remember Lance came down, and
I think Gerald came down.
Greg Bloomberg was with, and maybe, I don't know, there was quite a few guys.
Probably Jeff Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that was a good time. I had never been to that before. That was fun.
Yeah.
I like good guys, though.
Huh?
Good guys is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good shows. They don't get crazy, but getting crazy is good too sometimes.
So of all the cars you've had and bought and sold, what car is or was your favorite?
That 56 Nomad I have. That's number one.
I figured that was the question.
The red hardtop is number two because it's fun. It lays rubber. Oh my God! They don't need to blacktop my road out here. It is covered. So.
And people wonder why I haven't got the Chevelle to you yet, because you'll be doing burnouts in it and tearing shit up in it. We haven't even drove that car yet. We got to finish it. That person sitting beside you needs to help finish the trunk panels. She needs to sew some pleats.
Well, I tell you what, I got to come back down and watch Hallmark with her. That's the only way to get the job done, I figure.
Yeah, that's how you tricked her into helping on the door panels and the carpet before.
So speaking of the Chevelle, for the last 41 minutes, we've heard nothing but Tri-5s and Corvettes. Where did the Chevelle come from?
Well, we kind of always wanted to build a car together, and we talked about it off and on, and Mom kind of encouraged us, yeah, you two should do a car together, but it's not going to be crazy. I remember she would go, it's not going to be expensive. And when we started talking, I just figured you'd pick a Tri-5, and you're like, let's do a first-gen Chevelle, because I had a 64. And we started looking and looked at a few 64 and 5s and ended up talking my buddy Matt Lindbaum in Galva to selling, or by Woodhall, used to live in Galva. When I ran around in my 64, he had the 65 that he ran around in. So that's actually the car that we got. Matt had it since he was like 14 when I got my Chevelle. Matt was a couple years younger than me. And so, yeah, Matt says the only reason that he would sell it if we were going to fix it up together. So that's why we got Matt Lindbaum's Chevelle. And then I learned.
And I told Mom, I said, I wonder if that car's any good. And I had called and told you about it. And so you got a hold of Matt. And then I went over there and got it and hauled it down to you. And on the boat,
I think I hauled it down.
Carrie hauled it down.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Yeah, because you sent me to Tennessee with that trailer with the shittiest tires.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, Matt had that car, and he was always going to put a bigger motor in it, and he kind of tore it down. And he was a body man there in those years, and life got in the way with kids and everything, and it was sitting in a barn, and tornado took the barn away and beat the hell out of the car, and it just sat there on jack stands on the concrete slab with no motor and sitting there, no front clip on. And actually, the tornado lost some of the sheet metal and was never found. Never found the hood.
It was a sad-looking mess.
But the bones of it was really solid. It needed quarters and doors and everything. But I hassled Matt for a couple years and kept telling him I was turning him over to the Chevelle Abuse Association. And then finally, that's when it finally says, well, you guys really want that car? I was like, yeah, we're kind of looking for one. So that's how that 65 Chevelle came about. And Dad don't like big diameter wheels, so we made it real hot roddy and mini tubbed it, 15s and 1610s, and it's got a big block shoved back like a race car into the cowl and put it together. And you came down quite a few times and spent a week, and I didn't work on customer cars, and we worked on it. And did a lot of styling stuff that you would put in your cars that you always did, the Impala bucket seats, the big rubber H Hirsch shifter boot, and even down to the clear plastic floor mats that I put in it.
Yeah, by the time I built my cars, I couldn't afford floor mats, so I just go get those little Kmart used to sell them. I used to get them at Kmart.
Yeah.
I don't know if Kmart's even in business anymore.
I remember I had more than one person at SEMA came up, when SEMA was open. They're like, hey, man, you can take those cheap floor coverings out. The show's open now. You're not moving it around. And I'm like, no, those floor mats have a story. So then you tell the story, and everybody thought that was pretty cool.
So how many of your cars, the trunks were actually finished?
If you watch Hallmark, there's going to be one. But you got to watch Hallmark with your favorite daughter.
We don't need to finish the trunk because his vehicles never had the trunk finished, so it's done.
The best story about that Chevelle, though, when we decided we was going to build this together, and I'll never forget, he said, well, I'm going to be doing probably more than half of the labor. And I looked at you, and if I remember correctly, I said, fuck, figured you was going to do all the labor. And you pretty much did. I did come down and help do the brakes and put it on the frame. And
yeah, the last week that you came, before we took it to SEMA, I had the chassis was painted. We put the motor and tranny together, put it in the chassis. Of course, I had the exhaust all built and fabbed. We heat wrapped the exhaust. We put the exhaust on. The rear end was already hung, and you finished running the brake lines. You put the brakes on the front and rear of the car. We put the body on the car. So, like, when you showed up, other than the rear end was hanging, there was no A-arms or nothing on that chassis, and the body was over on the lift. Just got done spraying the bed liner on it. So we assembled all the chassis, put the body on, hung the doors, and something else we did, and then delivered it 4 days later to Ricky Burks for the wiring harness to be put in it. So we just threw parts at that thing for 4 days, man. It was scattered all over the shop, and we took that week, and it was pretty fun. So, and then you would stop at night and watch Hallmark.
That was elder abuse.
Yeah.
So you got all that stuff done in a week, and it's taken him long to get it running and to get it ready so you guys can start driving it?
It runs. We just haven't drove it yet.
Well, the thing is, we got to get the trunk done. We can't drive it around.
We've already determined that we don't need the trunk.
Around with the trunk not working.
Well, there is some paint touch-up issues that I'm still fighting on it too. So, when I was assembling it that week, I dropped the windows down inside the door and it dented out. So SEMA, you could just lean a sign up over that dent, and I still have to fix that and fix the thing on the hood that I'm not happy with. So still fighting.
Well, I think the thing about cars, when I look back on all the cars I've done, it's amazing not too many fathers can say this, but it is amazing what my son can do with metal. It just blows my mind.
Well, my story is for that when I was building, built the chassis table, and I was building the tube chassis for my 54 that we still own. Um, and I was chopping the top and doing all that stuff. Still living at home and working in the side of your machine shed. And I don't remember who it was, but I remember I was working on the car, and you and somebody walked through the door behind me, and that your buddy goes, "How's your son know how to do all this stuff?" And you looked at him, and I heard you say, "He don't. He's just not smart enough to know he's not supposed to."
And that's true. You know, that makes a lot of sense in life, too. A lot of people look at something and give up. I remember that's how I started working on cars. I had a 68 Chevelle when we were first married. When you were just a baby, I'd haul you around, throw you in there, and you dance like this to the music. And I always took it into a gas station in Abingdon to get it serviced, get the oil changed. And one night I was coming home, I had just got it serviced, backed it off the rack, and I was headed home, and the oil light came on. So I stopped, and I looked underneath, and there was oil everywhere underneath that car. Well, come to find out, when they took the filter off, they didn't check, and that one O-ring was up there from the old one, and it blew out. You're supposed to check that, you know. And I thought, well, if them dummies, I got to pay them to do that. I just will do that myself. And ever since then, I'll screw it up before I take it somewhere.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. Like kids ask me how you do something, or of course, I learned a lot with you and my uncle and cousin Lance and Blue and all that stuff. But I went to auto body school, but I kind of knew a lot from working for Reggie doing body work. But you just got to be, no matter what you're doing in life, not just working on cars, but whether you want to be a construction guy or you want to cut people's hair or for a living or whatever, you just got to do it. Don't be scared to try it. There's so many people that sit and worry about wish, or if they screw it up, if their buddies are going to laugh at them. And I didn't really care. I just wanted to build hot rod stuff. So when I built that 54, I would allegedly, how a lot of that stuff was built on that car. I'd draw all this stuff out and figure out what I wanted, because I built all the A-arms and everything from scratch, from both engineering that I learned at automotive college, and then reading a Boyd Coddington suspension book and looking at all the angles. So I'd draw all this stuff up, and I'd give you a measurement, and you would bring home, allegedly, from the place you worked at, pieces of tubing that were drilled and threaded already, so I could put the rod ends in them. And that's how the 4 bars were built, and all the upper and lower A-arms. So yeah, I'd engineered all the suspension, and allegedly you brought that stuff home for me, and then I assembled it and welded the A-arms together with the ball joint cups and everything. So allegedly.
Well, I always say that, these guys that are afraid to say you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, you got to think about, you got to go back. Whatever in this country's made, somebody made it first.
Yeah.
You think, well, if they did it, why can't I do it?
Yep.
That's my theory. And you're not going to learn anything if you don't try it. So
yep. Like the other day, we were trying to buy a make yourself homemade pizza. And I went to the grocery store down on the corner, and those 2 high school kids, "What do you mean you make your own pizza at home?" They just blew their mind. And the manager lady's like, "Oh, yeah, these kids are spoiled, but at least they're working. They're not sitting at home. They're 2 guys, they look like brothers. They look like they're 12, but they're high school kids working at the grocery store." And they just blew their mind that we were going to make our own pizza at home. And that's just how some of this generation is. And luckily I've got some buddies that their kids are, go-getters and car kids and stuff. But it's harder to find people that'll work like we did when we were little. We just worked all the time. I mean, I remember driving my 3-wheeler.
I think most of my foster homes, that's the reason they had me, was for working, but it didn't hurt me.
I accused you of saying that's the only reason you had me and my sister was just for free labor on the farm.
Yeah, I thought Lisa was going to keep up, and I seen there at a young age she wasn't going to do it, so I thought, well, I better shoot for a boy. But you turned out pretty good. I'm really surprised you can paint as good as you do, because remember what I told you when you was like 12 years old and 13? I went in your bedroom one night and you was smacking that thing against the wall, and I said, "You're going to go blind." That's why he has eye problems now.
Yeah, and I said, Dad, I'm over here.
Yeah.
So the sounds that you hear in the background are the dogs snoring laying back here.
I've got a yellow lab back here passed out.
He is snoring.
She's
literally.
been in the cattle yard with me today, so she's not very clean either.
And her new thing is she likes to get skunks.
She's got 2 now, and she hasn't been sprayed yet.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, she gets them by the head. I seen her get the one when I was burning a big brush pile in the other pasture over there. She grabbed that sucker right by the head and shook it and dropped it, and I throwed it in the burn pile. So, but anyway, cars are a good hobby to be in, and we just need to get more of those younger people involved.
Yep.
And it's people, us older guys that work on cars. I'm helping a young kid that's 14, just turned 14, Christine's son, and he's really interested in doing stuff. So we got to help him get going.
Yep. And he's a farm kid too, so he's used to hard work. So
yeah, he don't get to sit around much. So
all these years of living at home, Dad worked at a factory. After he left the one farm, he had a pretty serious injury. About ripped his arm off, ripped his thumb off. He's fell out of buildings and bounced off augers and all kinds of stuff. So he's pretty beat up. And 2 open heart surgeries with donor valves both times. And he's still running 450 acres worth of farmland. And when the calves are on the ground, he has a little over 100 head of cattle right now. And Dad's a go-getter. Dad taught me a 12-hour day of work is still only a half a day of work. And I remember when I was about 8 years old, we were sorting pigs at HK's, and I wanted to talk about what we were going to work on the 55 in the night or weekends, and you stopped and looked at me and said, son, if you can think about something other than your work you're doing, that means you're not working hard enough.
That's so true. But you got to have fun while you're working too, because I tell these young kids, once you start working, get out of school, you just well like it and make fun of it and have fun while you're doing it, because you're going to do it the rest of your life.
And then also there, when you bought the farm, it was not only did we have popcorn that we raised for 2 or 3 summers, and then a seasonal Christmas business that Mom kind of ran, and then you would come home from the factory and we'd work, and I'd go to the body shop and go to college and come home and work, and I worked till midnight a lot of nights and get up and drive 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to drive to college. And I remember one time... Allegedly.
Yeah, that's DCSF material right there, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I was of age at that time. I was driving and everything, so I was out of school. But that I remember always asking you, was like, when are you going to pay me? All this work I'm doing on the farm, the Christmas business, and you go, I'll feed you, and I'll put a roof over your head. So now, fast forward all these years later and how busy I am in the hot rod shop, you're always saying, hey, I'm going to come help you. I'm going to come down for a month and work. What's it pay? It's not too funny now when I say, I'll feed you and put a roof over your head.
That'd come back and bit me in the ass.
Yep. See, all that stuff, you never really thought I was listening to you.
Yeah. I can't believe I said that.
Yep.
Is it too late to take it back?
You can back pay.
I'll have to look, see if I can find the notebook on the back pay.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I remember Lisa would get a boyfriend and they'd show up here. Boy, they didn't last long because I've always put them to work.
Yeah, I never understood till I was older. I always thought my sister had a lot of boyfriends for other reasons. But no, my dad scared him off that she had to find a new one. She's not going to listen to this, is she?
They didn't last long. They couldn't run with us.
Hang. They couldn't hang.
They couldn't hang, no. But
well, that's all the questions that I have on my list here. So I want to thank you for taking the time. We had a little. We fought the recording in the microphone longer than we actually talked. So we've been doing this for about an hour tonight. So
I am here in Illinois with Dan because I came back for my mom, but we thought that this would be a good time to do the recording because I could help Dan with the technical side of things. Little did we know, poor Tim in Tennessee has struggled for the last half hour, several cuss words, because he couldn't get his.
But I want to thank you for being stupid because while you was doing this, I got my laundry folded.
Yeah, but Carrie did not marry me for my brains.
No, I did not.
She didn't.
She said she didn't marry you for anything else either. She thought we.
I did. I married him. Look at his skills. Remember when he's not smart enough to know that he can't? Tim did my hair.
It still looks like a piece of shag carpet the dog's been chewing on.
He's been doing my hair for the last 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. We went to Daryl Starbird's last week, and he looked at me and he said, "You gonna do anything with your hair?" And I said, "Nope."
Tim, you're another good thing about car people is this younger, I don't know how to say this, but like guys your age take an interest in like Daryl Starbird and that other Winfield.
Yeah.
You know, they need you guys too, as much as the young kids do.
Well, I'm always been a huge history fan. You know, we lived in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, we had a good hot rod scene in the area between Peoria and the Quad Cities and everything. But I lived reading those magazines and all these guys. I wasn't a sports guy, so like Daryl Starbird and Gene Winfield and those guys. To me, those are. I always say, what's that basketball player who's got his own shoe? Michael Jordan. These guys are my Michael Jordan. So, you know, when I worked up enough courage at these shows to talk to them when I was younger, and now I'm honored to be able to know them and can call them up and have interviewed them for this podcast series and stayed at Starbird's house. That's what me and Chris Ryan say, which we're recording him in a week or so. If it wasn't for those guys, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing for a living. You know, they did that back in the days, and the custom guys started basically the 40s, and then after the war, all those guys came back and started all the speed companies and everything. If it wasn't for those guys, not knowing that they're not supposed to do that, they definitely knocked the trees down and built the road for us to be able to do what we do for a living. And now you go to the SEMA show, and it's ridiculous, and Detroit Auto Ram and the Tulsa show and Grand National Roadster show, and it's just the parts and the companies and even T-shirt companies that are all because of those guys did it first back in the day. So it's just an honor to know those guys and hopefully continue the path for the next generation.
Oh, yeah. You're going to be one of those guys someday. You know, and you're going to be, people's going to look and say, yeah, I learned this from him when he built this Riviera or when he built this 54 Chevy. You know, so. But anyway, it's a good business to be in.
Yep.
It's a good business. Yep. You learn a lot. You meet a lot of nice people. The people's what I like. But when you do a podcast with Chris Ryan, would you tell him you started with the best looking and best personality human being on the face of the earth first?
Yep. I'll tell him so this is a slightly censored story. When my dad got to meet Chris Ryan at Des Moines Good Guys show a handful of years ago, I introduced him, then I go back on the microphone, I'm announcing autocross, and I turn around and look, and Chris is just laughing until he's almost crying. And I find out that my dad's telling him all these stories about when the sheep got stuck in the fence on the Strange farm, they knew where little Timmy was. Well, my dad is just feeding Chris a line of bullshit because we didn't have sheep on our farm. So, yeah. So Chris was loving it, and he still thinks it's true.
Neighbor had him, though.
Yep, I did work there. Yeah.
Every once in a while, Timmy would be late for school. He'd be driving down the road. He'd throw his boots in the car just in case he had to go help that poor old sheep out of the fence.
This is also coming from a guy that I heard you say for many years, and it took me till I was a teenager to understand what you said when you told one of your buddies that your cows were stump trained. That you'd stand on a stump and a cow would back up to you.
You say forward and back, you just stand there and she does all the work, buddy.
Allegedly.
All right,
yes.
so let's wrap this up.
Okay, so we've been talking to my dad, Dan Strange, and as I say, he had one good daughter and a decent son. So I just want to thank you for all you did for me growing up. And yeah, I'm trying to be shush it, Carrie. Hush, hush. I just want to thank you for everything you taught me. You taught me to work hard. You taught me to stand up for myself. I listened to most of the things you told me, except when I started dating Carrie and you told me not to. But I just want to thank you for everything, and I love you with all my heart. And
I still for you.
it's the only bad thing is that we're 9 hours apart right now. So
Yeah, that's the bummer part. But I don't know. All you parents out there listening to this that's got kids that wants to get, you're raising kids and you shake your head at them sometime. Throw those damn video games in the trash. Go buy an old junk car and build it together. You'll learn more, and your kid will be a good kid. He'll learn work ethic. He'll learn respect. And because when my kids needed it, allegedly they got their asses beat. And one of them should have had a few more. And I'm not mentioning which one.
she lives closer to you.
I'm wrong. All right, I love you, son.
Love you.
All right.
Okay, bye.
So that was a great episode of the Strange Motion Way podcast with my dad. I was in Tennessee remotely
I was in Illinois.
at the family farm with your mom in the background. She made herself aware, not aware, known.
In her presence.
Yeah, presence known a couple times there in the background. But thanks for my dad to doing it. It was pretty cool to sit down and talk to him. Of course, I get to talk to him. A lot of people ask, what is wrong with you? And they get my sense of humor, or they don't get my sense of humor. Well, if you get to know my dad, it's kind of his fault and a couple of my cousins and other people. So
The nut does not fall too far from the tree.
emphasis on
Nut.
nuts. Yeah.
All right, Tim, what do we got coming up next?
We have from Custom Camps of America, Jerry and Devonna Titus. Devonna sat in for most of it. We were at the Starbird Rod and Custom Car Show at Tulsa,
In
Oklahoma.
2023, we recorded this. So, again, our first attempt at recording these podcasts. So, it is a little sketchy. We've got some background noise because we are at a car show, so it's not the best audio.
A few people walk into our, quote, hidden room that we didn't really ask for permission to use.
Right. So, it's not about the audio quality. It's about the story we're trying to put out.
Yeah, great story. Custom Camps of America, Jerry and Devonna Titus.
Up next, the Strange Motion Way podcast, brought to you by Royal Purple Synthetic Oils.
Royal Purple premium synthetic motor oils and high-performance chemicals have been designed to improve performance in all conditions and provide cleaner operation, better mileage, and decreased oil change frequency. That means less oil changes. With products available for your gasoline and diesel engines, Royal Purple is the obvious choice for your performance needs. Drive with Royal Purple, the synthetic expert.